بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. We had been in the midst of discussion about various different people who've stood out in the past in the path of Tasawwuf, in the path of spirituality, who have become, you can say, role models of sort, and people have followed them. These are people who've inspired a lot of other people. So we discussed one of the first ones, Abul Qasim al-Junaid. We then discussed a few others like Imam al-Rifa'i. Now today we discuss Sayyid al-Qadir al-Jilani. He's got a very long biography because he's got so much, mashallah, to offer. Such a great individual he was, great person he was. We're not going to go through everything. I'm just going to mention a few things about him, and then about Sayyid Ahmad Badawi and a few others, and then inshallah we'll move on. So let's talk a bit about Sayyid al-Qadir al-Jilani. Imam Munawi mentions in his biographical work, he says that this is Abdul Qadir, son of Musa ibn Yahya al-Jilani. So Jilan is obviously a city, and he's considered a Hanbali scholar. That's very interesting, because generally some people think that Hanbalis are generally against Tasawwuf, because today some of the Hanbalis tend to be like that. Some people who associate themselves with the Hanbali school tend to be like that. But one of the greatest Sufis, one of the greatest, I mean, Shaykh Abdul al-Jilani is probably, his name is always at the forefront of this. He was a Hanbali scholar. And what's interesting is that Imam Ibn Taymiyyah had actually a lot of like for him. He's mentioned quite a few praises for him. So he was he had a very interesting life. He was an imam in fiqh as well, and in jurisprudence, and in tasawwuf, and he couldn't be compared to in Baghdad. There was nobody that could compare to him in Baghdad. In fact, what he was known about in Baghdad is that if you read, for example, Shaykh al-Hasan Ali Nadwi's Saviors of Islamic Spirit, if you read his Saviors of Islamic Spirit, he's got a chapter on him showing how the kind of work that he did in his gatherings in Baghdad, which was the Darul Khilafah of the time, the Abbasid Empire, located with its headquarters in Baghdad. So that's where he is. That's one of the greatest cities that we've known, Islamic cities that we've known, in terms of production of scholars and just the environment. So he's there, and there are various different not just scholars and others that come to his gatherings, but numerous other people come to his gathering, including the royalty, various ministers and part of the ruling family. They would come, and he was an inspiration for so many people. Used to come to his gatherings and make tawbah, change their life completely, and so on. So he's very, very powerful, and that's why he's the one who's actually known for then re-establishing, you can say, to kind of bring up this issue of taking bay'ah with your shaykh. It says that he's probably the first one responsible for formalizing it, because what he realized is that there's a lot of people who come and who benefit, but then the benefit of this doesn't necessarily carry on. So he says that if I can get a few people initiated into this particular order and make them give a pledge, then they're more likely to follow that up and then go and benefit others. So that was his thought, and that continues until today. So anyway, he was in Baghdad, as I mentioned. He was born there in 470 Hijri. 470 Hijri. So he grew up there as well, and there he got very interested in taking the path of spirituality from the others who were there, because Baghdad had a lot of spiritual scholars at the time, and he made extreme effort in that. That became his focus. So he would really go out of his way to make extra effort and extra exercises in trying to purify the heart and in trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to such a degree that sometimes he would basically just get a piece of cloth that he would wind around his head, and then he would wear a jubba, and then he would walk barefooted, and he would basically just eat some really basic vegetables and some leaves. And he used to really exert this kind of effort for a very long time to try to abstain from basically indulging in the dunya. This was just his way of doing that. And there's numerous things that have been mentioned about him, numerous karamat, etc. And I don't want to go into the depth of that right now. He used to give fatwa according to the madhab of Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, so he was quite proficient in both the Shafi'i and the Ahmad and the Hanbali madhabs. And mashallah, the scholars of Iraq used to really be amazed by the beautiful answers and responses he used to give in terms of it. So he was not just a Sufi, but he was a jurist as well, right? So he was a jurist in which other people used to actually consult him, and people would admire his work for that. A very interesting story related about him, that Shaitaan comes in different forms. I think we've had this discussion before. We think that Shaitaan can't come in a form anymore. We don't know that, right? Because we know that Shaitaan comes in the form. He came during the time of the Prophet ﷺ in a number of battles. He was there, comes in the form of an old man or somebody else to try to make people change their opinion and so on. We've discussed this before. So on one occasion, Shaykh al-Qadir al-Jilani is there, and he sees that there is suddenly a light, a shining light that fills the horizon in front of him. And then he hears a voice coming from there saying that, I am your Lord, Ana Rabbuk, I am your Lord. وَقَدْ أَبَحْتُ لَكَ الْمُحَرَّمَاتِ, I've just made all haram things permissible for you. They're now lawful for you. Anything that's supposed to be unlawful, prohibited, haram, they're all lawful for you now. So immediately he says, إِخْسَعْ يَا لَعِينَ, right? He immediately deters him by that term. He says, may you be would you call it, degraded, oh accursed one. So then suddenly that light that he suddenly saw turns into smoke and darkness, right? Now I'm not sure if anybody else could see the same thing, or this was a vision he was having, right? At the end of the day, this is his vision that he's discussing. So then he hears the voice saying, this is Shaitaan, he hears the voice saying, Najawta minni bi fiqhik, you've just saved yourself from me by your religious understanding, right? That sounds good enough for us, right? When somebody will say that, well, you've understood this, so you know your fiqh, so that's why, right? So this voice says to him that you've just protected, or you've just been given refuge through your understanding of the deen, whereas I have وَقَدْ أَضْلَلْتُ بِهَذَا سَبْعِينَ صِدِّيقًا, I've managed to actually mislead at least 70 people like this, 70 really high up people of spirituality. I've managed to mislead 70 of them. The other version actually says that, he says, no, it was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that made me understand you. Because again, Shaitaan was trying to say that you have been protected by your knowledge. So giving the credibility or the credence, the credit to the knowledge. But rather it should be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyway, somebody then asked Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, how do you know that was Shaitaan? That was like such an astonishing, amazing kind of experience. How do you know that was Shaitaan? بِمَا عَرَفْتَ أَنَّهُ Shaitaan. He says, well, obviously when somebody tells you that all the haram things have been made halal, that person must be Shaitaan to you, right? Anybody who tells you something is haram, it becomes halal for you, that's a person is Shaitaan. Somebody comes and tells you that, brother, you don't have to pray, just know this is you can take this as a maxim, that person is Shaitaan. Somebody comes, tells you that you don't have to cover up, right? To our sisters, you don't have to cover up, Shaitaan. I mean, what else? I mean, making something clearly haram into halal, that's Shaitaan, that's his sign. So Shaitaan didn't try this once, he tried more often. You might think, how come Shaitaan doesn't come to us? The big Shaitaan doesn't have to come to us. We're probably small fry. He can, Shaitaan, we are, unfortunately, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us strength and fortitude, we're basically misled by just Shaitaan al-Ins, just somebody telling us to do wrong, something we watch, something we see. We're misled very easily. Shaitaan doesn't have to come himself. But with these people, Shaitaan had to go himself because nothing else worked. And even he did not work, even he wasn't strong enough. So just because Shaitaan doesn't come to us, we're not going to end up denying these things. I don't want the Shaitaan to come to us, right? Although it sounds like, like a trademark that once you become a wali of Allah, Shaitaan might come to you, but Allah protect us from the Shaitaan. A'udhu billahi Na'udhu billahi min ash-shaytanir rajim. So that's Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani. I just want to mention the passing because otherwise we could be here for days discussing these great people, their life stories. There's huge books written about them. One of the things about Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani is that a lot of his works, a lot of his actual lectures have been written out in English as well, and they're very, very powerful. Several volumes of them. There's actually several volumes of them. They've been published by Al-Baz Publications. I don't know if you can still find them. I haven't seen them around for a while, but Mukhtar Holland translated a lot of them. The next person I want to talk to you about is Sayyid Ahmad al-Badawi. Now, if I told you half the stories that were related about him, you would probably find it absolutely unbelievable. So I'm not even going to mention half the stories about him because there's some really extreme stories about him. I'll just mention a few things because Imam Sawi has actually, Imam Dardir has quoted him as one of the very important people. Now, these aren't people that were necessarily everybody knew, but people who were in Egypt at the time, these were the scholars. I mean, Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani the world over is celebrated. A lot of people would never have heard of Sayyid Ahmad al-Badawi in the subcontinent maybe, right? So he doesn't really feature as well, but it's nice to know. So Imam Munawi says about him as well that this is Sayyid Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Ibrahim ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr al-Badawi al-Sharif al-Hasib. And he is from originally a tribe of Sham. However, his father had moved to the Maghrib, which is the North Africa. That's where he was, and that's where he was born. So he was born in Fez, which is a city in Morocco, one wonderful city. And there he was born in 569. So about 100 years after Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, 569. So what he does in the beginning is he memorizes the Quran, right? In the beginning, he memorizes the Quran. And he studies a bit of Shafi'i fiqh. He then goes to Hajj with his father and his brothers in some years later. And then they stay in Makkah for a while. His father actually dies in Makkah Mukarramah. His father, those days you could go to Makkah Mukarramah, as long as you got there, you could stay there for a while. I don't think there was much visa issues in those days and paying extra if you've been in the last 2 years and all the rest of it. You could just get there. So his father is actually buried in the Mu'alla cemetery, which is where Khadija radiallahu anha is buried. That's the famous cemetery of Makkah Mukarramah, right? So on the north of Makkah. And the reason why he's called Badawi is because this sheikh used to constantly wear a mask, cover his face. He used to basically have a niqab of some sort, constantly, right? So this is the kind of interesting stuff about him. He never, he always kept that on his face later on. And he never got married. And he would tell a lot of people off. So anything that was done wrong, he was known to tell people off. He always admonished people. That's what he's known as Attab, from Itab, right? And then eventually, he became silent. He stopped speaking. He would stay silent for very long periods. He stopped speaking. He would then only speak by giving gestures. He stopped speaking with his mouth. Like I said, this is quite strange stuff that's mentioned about him. And then eventually, I would say that he probably became a madhub. He became, this is a concept where somebody, it almost seems like they're losing their mind. Right? I met one of these people in North Africa. He used to be outside a particular building. And while he sits there and they may not even pray, some of these people, by the way. Right? Some of these people may not even pray. Right? I'll let you know that. And the reason for it is that they've kind of lost their mind. But they've lost their mind in Allah, as opposed to lost their mind and come crazy like a madman. They almost seem like madmen in a sense. But you have to be very careful about them, because they seem to have on their path, on their journey, they've kind of, it's Ibn Ata'illah, etc. They all describe this thing. They generally we refer to them as madhub. You want to be careful about these people. If you ever come across them, you may say something, but if they make a dua, that dua is probably going to be accepted, right? And when you say they don't pray, is because when you're not in your full conscious sanity, then you don't pray anyway. In fact, from a fiqhi perspective, if you become unconscious for 24 hours, right, for over 24 hours, over 5 prayers into the 6th prayer, those 5 prayers will be forgiven. If you slept for 24 hours, your prayers would not be forgiven. You have to do qada of them, right? But the only time when your prayers are actually forgiven for men, for women, they get their monthly holidays anyway, but for men, the only time prayer is forgiven for them is if they absolutely become debilitated, they can't move at all for over 24 hours, and they miss 6 prayers, they get into the 6th prayer like that, then 5 prayers become qada, right? They don't have to do qada, or if they become unconscious for that long. So if somebody is losing their mind for that long, then they don't have to pray. That's why insane people don't have to pray. Insane people don't have to pay zakat, for example, etc., etc. Because they're not mukallaf, they're not responsible anymore. Responsibility of that, you must pray, you must do this, you must observe halal, haram, etc. That is all based on aql, consciousness. If you've lost your aql, it's not what it's supposed to be, then you can't be accountable. So take this, but he was such a spiritually accomplished individual that people used to go and want to benefit from him. So anyway, at one point, this is what happened. He says, فَاسْتَغْرَقَ إِلَى الْأَبَدِ. He basically became engrossed in whatever this state was forever. And but he was a man, known for his high chivalry, high manliness. Like a lot of honor, self-honor. That's why another sheikh of the time, he says that I was told by the Prophet ﷺ, maybe in his dream, whatever, that in Egypt, because eventually he ended up in Egypt. Eventually he ends up in Egypt. And that's probably why the sheikh, who's an Egyptian, is mentioning this point. So he's saying that among the awliya of Misr, among the famous awliya of Misr, or the well-known, after Muhammad ibn Shafi'i, Muhammad ibn Idris, the Prophet ﷺ called Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i a wali of Allah, right? That after him, one of the person with the greatest sense of dignity and self-honor is this person, is Shaykh al-Badawi. And then after that is Sayyidah Nafisa, is one of the granddaughters of the Prophet ﷺ. There's a number of grandchildren of the Prophet ﷺ, family members who are buried there in Egypt, in Cairo. It's well known. I mean, those places, lots of people come there too. Then he says it's ثُمَّ شَرَفُ الدِّينَ al-Kurdi, then it's al-Manufi. So he would go for days, this Shaykh al-Badawi would go for days without eating, without drinking, without sleeping. A lot of the time he would just be gazing towards the heavens, to the sky. Remember, he's in a different mode, in a different state. So he's gazing, شَاخِصٌ بِبَصَرِهِ نَحْوَ السَّمَاءِ. And his, so numerous other stories that are mentioned about him. But he was actually told, he heard a voice telling him that you must go to a place in Egypt called Tandata, right? And that is where you're going to stay eventually. So what happens is, he first went to Iraq. This was in the beginning, right? I've told you about his state afterwards. But in the beginning, he was told to travel first, and he was told to go east and then go west, and then eventually he says that you're going to be settled in Tandata. That was kind of the prediction that was given to him. So he went to Iraq, and there he meets these 2 great people. This is Kaylani, somebody else, and Rifa'i. They said, Ahmed, the keys of Iraq and the keys of Iraq, of the Indian subcontinent, Yemen, the east and west, is in our hands. Meaning they were very respected in all of these areas by the people. So basically we've got the keys to the hearts of the people, right? He says, they said, choose whichever one you want. Which one do you want? He says, I'm not going to take the keys of anybody except from the hand of the Fattah, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Then after that he went to Egypt as he had been originally instructed, and that's where he was met by the famous ruler of Egypt, one of the greatest generals that we've had, right? His name is, and I've been to 2 of his masjids, and even his grave is there, right? There's actually 2 major complexes that are built by him. That is the very famous Al-Zahir Baybas. Al-Zahir Baybas, I think he was one of them that who attacked the Tartars, right? So he says that he was, when he got there, he met with him with all of his whole army was there, and he really honored him a lot. And So he got there in 634 Hijri. So then he went to this place called Tandata, and then he settled on the roof of a building. And that's where he then stayed. He would not leave this place night or day. Right? He would not leave this place night or day. For about 12 years he stayed there. Sometimes he would be overcome by something and he would shout very, very loudly. Numerous people, for example, found a lot of benefit from him in terms of getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they would go and they would sit with him. There were already a number of awliya in Tandata when he got there. So what happens is, when he came, several of them left. They couldn't stand, they just couldn't be there anymore. They were just overawed by him. They couldn't stay. Some of them left. For example, out of reverence and respect for him, like Shaykh Hassan al-Akhnani, and he went and stayed somewhere else, and that's where he settled, and then that's where he's buried. And mashallah, he's got a lot of respect there. But some of them stayed, like Sheikh Salim al-Maghribi, Sheikh Salim, and a number of others. However, there are some who criticized him, who objected to him, and who opposed him. For example, there was a Sahibul Iwan. He was probably somebody to do with the ruling party there, or to do with the rulers there. And he was a wali of Allah himself. He was known as Wajhul Qamar, the face of the moon. That's how well respected he was at the time. Kana waliyan kabiran. He was a major wali of Allah at the time. But then it says that he developed hasad and jealousy for him. Like, who is this new sheikh that's coming in town and that's become so popular? This is something that people have to worry about, because when somebody else comes in, then it's like competition. So it says that he was affected by this. That's why his wilaya was taken away. His closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was taken away. And he then died afterwards. But he says that the place that he's buried in, right? This is the biographer saying this, and I've read this in another Egyptian scholar's work, Imam Sha'rani's work. He mentions this in Adab al-Sahba, if I remember correctly as well, right? So I've never been to this place myself, but he says that if you go to Tandata, the place where this Wajhul Qamar is buried, he says it's become a place where dogs gather now, right? It's become a place where dogs gather now, and he's saying that there is absolutely no smell there of any goodness. It's a bad vibes you get in that place. It says about the Shaykh Badawi that whenever he would wear any kind of garment or imama or something like that, he wouldn't take it off afterwards until it became completely worn out. I think he was in another world, right? So don't think of him as kind of some normal person. Why isn't he doing that? Why isn't he doing that? He would just not take it off. One day, one of his students, I think, Abdul Majid, he said to him, I want to see your face, because, remove your cover from your face. I want to see your face. So he says that kullu nadratin bi rajul. Every glimpse will be for a man. Every glimpse will cost a man, will cost an individual, right? So the person said, Arini, I want to see your face. He opened it and he died instantly, right? I remember hearing these stories before. I could never understand them before. But again, these are, Wallahu alam what it is, right? Wallahu alam what it is. Numerous other karamat that he had. I'm not gonna go into all of them. I just want to bring all of this to you because you will hear these stories. Again, our response to them is, whatever the case is, these are all possibilities, right? Just because they don't happen to us. I mean, the last lecture we dealt with that. I don't want to repeat that again, but that's basically what it is. He eventually passed away in 665 Hijri. Then we've got, again, somebody else that the Egyptians have a lot of respect for, is Sayyid Ibrahim al-Dasuqi. Sayyid Ibrahim al-Dasuqi. Imam Munawi says about him that he was a Qurashi and a Hashimi, and he was Shafi'i in madhab, one of the great imams of the time. And again, numerous things. He knew a number of languages. He could speak to various different people. There's numerous karamat mentioned about him. And again, I'm not going to go into all of that right now. There's a very interesting story about a crocodile who had taken some kids, some child, and the mother came and he sent one of his people to announce by the river that whichever crocodile took it, he needs to bring it back. And the crocodile came and brought the child back. And so many other stories that are related about him. He died in 670 Hijri. 670 Hijri. That 600s, they seem to be like after Ghazali. Remember, Ghazali's just passed away. Jilani's just passed away, rahimahumullah. Right? So that looks like the kind of 5th, 6th century where numerous Sufis are picking up at this point. Then you have Sayyid Ali al-Hasan al-Shadhili. He's obviously mentioned the very famous ones of Egypt. You can tell those who are well known in Egypt, right? When you go to the subcontinent, you're going to mention others names like Shaykh Ahmad Sarhindi, right, which is Mujaddid al-Thani, right, of the earlier ones, and Hajwari, and there's numerous others that were around the Delhi area and the surrounding area. So I guess he's Egyptian, so that's why he's mentioning Sayyid Ali al-Hasan al-Shadhili. And Imam Shadhili, I think I don't even need to mention too much, because there are so many things about Shadhili. There are so many things about Shadhili, and he has a whole tariqah, and it's actually very popular today. You don't really hear much about the Dusuqi tariqah, or the Badawi tariqah, for example. You hear a few things about the Rifa'iyya, right? To be honest, I mean, this Sayyid Abul Hasan al-Shadhili, he is a Sayyid. He's from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and not only that, he seems to be. This seems to be his. He seems to be from the family of the Mawlai Idris. Mawlai Idris. If anybody's been to Morocco, they will notice that Mawlai Idris is the is basically the founder of Morocco as such. He's buried down there, and he's got a tomb, etc. And he was supposed to be from the family of the Prophet ﷺ, and that's why the current rulers are also from the family of the Prophet ﷺ. They go up further on, so it looks like this particular individual is also from that. But then he eventually went to Egypt, and that's where he's buried, towards the southern part of Egypt. That's where he's buried, and he was, in terms of tasawwuf, he's actually from the Qadiri line, but because so his tariqah goes up to Shaykh Abdul al-Jilani. He's about probably 2 or 3 centuries later, but that goes up to Shaykh Abdul al-Jilani. But then he becomes so well known himself that the Shadhili tariqah is the Shadhili Qadiri tariqah. It's like a sub branch of the Qadiri tariqah. That's basically what that's about. So there's numerous. I mean, as I said, we can go on speaking about these great people, but finally he mentioned Sayyid Muhammad al-Khalwati. Again, Sayyid Muhammad al-Khalwati is another great scholar, a great Sufi of the time, but we're not going to mention much more about that. I want to carry on now from what he says. So he says, then he mentions al-Qutb al-Rabbani Sayyid Abdullah al-Naqshbandi wa atba'uhu فهؤلاء كلهم سادات الأمة المحمدية رضي الله عنهم وعنا بهم آمين. All of these are the leaders of the Ummah of Muhammadiyah in terms of spirituality. Right? In terms of spirituality, these are the ones whose names shine out. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with us. Ameen ya Rabb. So then he says, فَالشَّيْخُ الَّذِي يَدُلُّ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَجِبُ أَن يَكُونَ قَدْ سَلَكَ عَلَى طَرِيقَةِ شَيْخٍ مِّن مَشَائِخِ الطَّرِيقِ. Anybody who sits down as a shaykh, right, who is basically telling people about the path of Allah, who's directing people to the path of Allah, it is necessary that that person has already also undertaken a similar journey at the hands of another one of the mashayikh of the tariq, and the person has himself expended all of that effort to reach a particular, because the more effort you put into spirituality, the higher the level of spirituality you will attain. So the best is going to be the one who's had the highest level of effort in becoming a better person and becoming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, حَتَّى تَهَذَّبَتْ وَزَالَتْ عَنْهُ الرُّعُونَاتِ الْبَشَرِيَّةِ, to such a degree that they have become تَهَذَّبَتْ. Generally, word تَهَذَّب means civilized. Here it would mean disciplined. The person is very disciplined in their methodology, in their way that they do things for the sake of Allah, and all of their human weaknesses have disappeared. or at least most of their human weaknesses that attack people, that generally cause people to fail, they have left. وَإِلَّا فَيَجِبُ اجْتِنَابُهُ. Otherwise, it is wajib to abstain from these people because they can't take you to Allah. To be honest, I mean, our state today is such that we don't have too many accomplished people. There are, mashallah, there would be, but there aren't as many as we would like. That's why if we're to abide by this, we'd probably never find it'd be very difficult to find a shaykh, especially somebody you can relate to. There are great shuyukh, but you may not be able to relate to them. They may speak a different language or whatever the case is. Right? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to suffice us, to give us, and to provide us. فإن كثيرا من الناس من قلد إماما من الأئمة الأربعة رضي الله عنهم ولكنه في عقائده زاغ عن اعتقادهم فلم يعتقد معتقد أهل السنة وهم فرق شتى قد ضلوا في عقائدهم كالقدرية وغيرهم. He says, a lot of people who have followed an imam of the four imams, right? There are people who follow the four imams maybe in jurisprudence, but then he says that in their aqaid, in their beliefs, so in fiqh and jurisprudence they follow somebody, but when it comes to their beliefs, they've basically gone against the beliefs of even the four imams. So they don't even have the beliefs of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah anymore. And there's numerous of these sects which have basically been misled, like the Qadiriyah, etc. They may be Hanafi, Shafis, Malikis, Hanbalis, whatever, but they've lost the path. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَزْعَمُ أَنَّهُ سَالِكَ طَرِيقِ أَهْلِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى فَيَتَزَيَّى بِزِيِّهِمْ. And there are then those people who think that they're on the path of Allah. They are on the path of Tasawwuf and path of Tariqah, and they even dress like that. فَيَتَزَيَّى بِزِيِّهِمْ. They dress like that with the turbans and everything else, right? وَيَتَكَلَّمْ بِمَا يُوهِمُ النَّاسِ أَنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. They even speak the lingo. They even use the terms, the Sufi, the proper Sufi terms. They use all of those. So anybody listening to them think that this guy is a great Sufi. May Allah preserve us from this. وَالْحَالْ أَنَّهُ بَطَّالٌ. Whereas their real state is that they are completely false, right? They are completely charlatans. يَمْلَأُ بَطْنَهُ مِنَ الطَّعَامِ. They're basically just filling their filling their stomach with food. That's their whole purpose for this. Filling their stomach with food. سَوَاءٌ كَانَ حَلَالًا أَوْ حَرَامًا. They don't care whether it's halal or haram that comes to them. When you become popular like that, there will be people bring you things you don't care, halal, haram, you just take and eat. وَلَيْلْ حَرَامًا. And وَيَثِبُ عَلَى الدُّنْيَا وُثُوبَ السَّبُعِ عَلَى الْفَرِيسَةِ. And they literally pounce onto the world just like a wild animal pounces onto its prey. وَرُبَّمَا جَعَلَ نَفْسَهُ شَيْخًا. And sometimes they put themselves up as a shaykh. وَلَهُ أَتْبَاعٌ يَصْطَادُونَ لَهُ بِالشِّرْكِ مَشِيخَتِهِ يا Allah قَاذُورَاتِ الْحُطَامَ الْفَانِ. He's basically saying then he has his murids, his associates, who will then basically be hunting down people to bring them to him. Come on, you need to come to our shaykh. The other day somebody told me that I told so and so that I'm, I've given bay'ah to you or whatever the case is. Like, why do you have to tell anybody who you've given bay'ah to? You give bay'ah to somebody and then you go and tell everybody. Why would you need to do that? Have you just joined the club and mashallah now you've got you're a club member now, so you're going to get some prestige by this? Seriously. If you become bay'ah to somebody, why do you do it for? The whole purpose of it is that I want to learn from that. You want to learn from that person. So it's a very personal thing. Nobody even needs to know, to be honest. Nobody really needs to know. You become bay'ah to somebody. I'm not saying you need to keep it a secret, but I'm saying you don't need to publicize it either. Right? Okay, I'm bay'ah to so and so. So what? What does that make you? He's a great person. What about you though? You think it's like you've gotten on there, you joined the club now? That's why, subhanAllah, I think maybe some orders even tell you, because I did speak to one particular shaykh who is in a different tariqah, and I asked him about the tariqah exactly, And he says, look, to be honest, our tariqah is so simple. You get into it, the Shaykh does most of the work. You just have to do, these small things like this. The Shaykh does most of the work. That's it. That's wonderful. That's like you putting him onto a conveyor belt. You're on an escalator now. You don't have to climb yourself. The Shaykh is going to take you. That's a possibility. But Maulana Shafii Thanwi, he's explained this very clearly. He says, look, the Shaykh can give you a boost. Because Shaykh is generally going to inspire you, is going to give you a boost. But you need to provide the substance. He'll give you a boost, and if you don't work hard afterwards, you're going to come back down very quickly. So if the Shaykh gives you a boost, and you feel all elated, you need to work hard to build that base so that you don't come back down. Or you don't come back down as where you were. So having a Shaykh is not something to show off about. It's a very personal thing between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Shaykh. And alhamdulillah, just because you're part of a Shaykh doesn't make you any greater person. In fact, if it makes you arrogant, then that's to your detriment. That's to our detriment. So we need to be very careful about this. That's why he's saying that this particular who puts himself up, and then he's telling his muridis, go and find others. Right? Go and find others, that we need to hunt them down. Whereas وَيَزْعُمُونَ أَنَّهُمْ عَلَى شَيْءٍ, and they, all his murids, etc., they're actually thinking that a Shaykh's onto something. This guy is a great Shaykh. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَذَّابُونَ وَكَاذِبُونَ. These people are big liars. وقد أشار لهم العارف بالله تعالى سيد عمر ابن الفارض رضي الله عنه بقوله رضوا بالأماني وابتلوا بحظوظهم وخاضوا بحار الحب دعوا فما ابتلوا. That these people, they were satisfied with just their whims and notions, and they were tested by whatever they've been given in this world. They jumped into the seas, the oceans of love, just by claim, whereas they didn't even become wet. They thought they're swimming in the ocean of spirituality, but the water has not even moistened them, has not even made them wet at all. فهم في السرى لم يبرحوا من مكانهم وما ضعنوا في السير عنه وقد كلوا بل تأخروا ورجعوا القهقرة لأنهم تبعوا هوى. In fact, these people have actually retrogressed because they've just followed their whims of their nafs. والشيطان يقودهم إلى كل ما يحبه منهم كما قال وعن مذهبي لما استحبوا العمى على الهدى حسدا من عند أنفسهم ضلوا. He's basically saying that the Shaitan became their drivers, became their leaders to that which they wanted. That Allah, Shaitan is just going to take them further into what they wanted. حتى صار من أخلاق من تصدق عليهم بالصدقة وأكرمهم بكرامة اتخذوا ذلك عادة وطلبوا منهم من فعل معهم الإحسان. I mean, we'll carry on with this later, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us His closeness, and grant us the love of Him and the love of those whose love will benefit us in His court. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث. اللهم يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Oh Allah, we sit here today asking for your mercy and your forgiveness. Oh Allah, we sit here today asking for your blessing. Oh Allah, to envelope us with your blessings. Oh Allah, to bless us in everything that you have given us. Oh Allah, we thank you for the security you have provided us. Oh Allah, for the health that you have provided us. Oh Allah, above all, we thank you for the iman that you have given us. Oh Allah, we thank you for the concern that you have given us. Oh Allah, we don't have enough concern. Oh Allah, we aren't able to do enough for you. We are unable to praise you. Oh Allah, we're unable to worship you and fulfill the rights of your worship. Oh Allah, we ask you for forgiveness for our shortcomings and for our defects. Oh Allah, we ask you forgiveness for our sins, for our excesses. Oh Allah, for our violations. Oh Allah, for our infractions. Oh Allah, we ask you to forgive us for our disobediences. Oh Allah, only you can forgive us, and we can't even ask anyone else. Oh Allah, we ask that you grant us your love and the love of those whose love will benefit us in your court. Oh Allah, we ask that these great people that we have spoken about, oh Allah, we ask that you grant us the blessings that you granted them. Oh Allah, we haven't worked as much as them. We're not as pure as these people, but oh Allah, we ask that you, due to our love of them and our Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that you benefit us and you grant us. Oh Allah, you've told us that you are to be asked, and you're the best of those who are to be asked, and you're the best of those who can give. Oh Allah, so we have nobody else to ask except you. You are the only one we can ask. You're the best one we can ask. So here we sit here, the old and the young, the men and the women, and we sit and we ask you to bless us all, and to do not let us turn away from here without being forgiven. Oh Allah, we know we haven't offered much in way of worship. Even whatever we have offered, it is broken, it is defective. Oh Allah, it is weak. But oh Allah, we ask you to complete us, to make us accomplished. Oh Allah, to make us closer, and to make the rest of our life better than the previous part of our life. Oh Allah, grant us satisfaction, oh Allah, by allowing us to do that which is to please you, and that which is acceptable in your court. Oh Allah, protect us from the harms and protect us from the wrongs and the disobediences. Oh Allah, we ask that you help us and you assist us. Oh Allah, protect us and our children. Protect us and our children. Protect us and our children and our descendants until the day of judgment. Protect us and our families, our health. Oh Allah, protect our health and grant us blessing in our health. Oh Allah, we ask that you accept our du'as. Oh Allah, we ask that you accept our du'as, and you send your abundant blessings on our Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and you grant us his company in the hereafter. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillah.